Usually, killing off your main character and narrator halfway through a series finale is, well, it's a guaranteed recipe for an absolute narrative disaster.
Right, yeah, a total disaster.
Because, when you build a house over multiple seasons, the finale is supposed to be the roof. It covers everything. It makes sense of the foundation for you. But when Euphoria aired its deeply delayed, highly anticipated 93-minute series finale, they didn't just forget the roof.
No, they really didn't.
They took a wrecking ball to the foundation 45 minutes in, lit the debris on fire, and then somehow turned the resulting crater into a country western saloon.
It was a massive structural rupture. I mean, it's incredibly rare to see a piece of television so deliberately shatter its own established identity.
And that is exactly why we are diving into this for you today. We have a massive stack of sources on the table in front of us, curated specifically for you.
A huge stack.
Yeah, we're looking at official HBO press releases, highbrow cultural critiques from places like The Guardian, and of course, the raw, unfiltered, deeply emotional reaction threads straight from the fans on Reddit.
The Reddit threads were wild.
Oh, totally unhinged. So our mission today is to unpack Season 3, Episode 8, which is titled In God We Trust. We really need to figure out how this neon-soaked high school drama morphed into a bleak gangster epic, like why it completely broke the internet,
Right.
and what this incredibly divisive conclusion actually tells us about modern television, addiction, and Gen Z culture. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to really understand the sheer scale of the stylistic and thematic earthquake this finale represents, we have to start right at the epicenter. The show didn't just wrap up its storylines, it violently forced its audience to confront a reality that, well, television usually tries to gloss over.
Exactly.
It sparked these fierce debates about its ultimate moral message, mostly because it just completely refused to play by the traditional rules of a television wrap-up.
Which means we need to jump straight into the most shocking yet strangely grounded moment of the entire 93-minute runtime. The death of our main character, Rue Bennett.
Yeah.
And this happens just 45 minutes in. I mean, we are barely at the halfway mark of the episode.
Right, and the mechanics of her death are what make it so devastating. Creator Sam Levinson orchestrated this scenario that weaponized the character's core vulnerability.
Let's break down that trap because it is terrifyingly calculated. Rue has just survived this horrific ordeal. She's been dragged behind a truck, she's battered, she's limping, but she seems to have finally escaped the immediate physical danger.
She thinks she's safe.
Exactly. She goes to Alamo Brown, the cartel boss, and Alamo doesn't threaten her. Instead, he hands her a fanny pack full of cash and a bottle of Percocets. He tells her she's his best worker, tells her she needs to rest up and heal.
It's pure manipulation.
It is. To completely cement her trust, he even takes a clean pill himself right in front of her. But he knows, and you, the audience, know, that the pills in the bottle he gives her are laced with a lethal dose of fentanyl.
He is heavily exploiting her psychology there. I mean, Alamo is fully aware she's been cooperating with the DEA, but instead of a traditional cartel execution, he leverages her disease against her.
Wow, yeah.
He is banking on the absolute certainty that, in a moment of sheer pain and exhaustion, she will be biologically and psychologically incapable of resisting a relapse.
And he's entirely right. She takes the pill later at her sponsor Ali's house. What struck me and what set Reddit completely on fire was the total lack of spectacle.
Oh, absolutely.
She doesn't die in a blaze of glory. She doesn't even die in a dramatic hospital scene. She dies quietly on Ali's couch. She has Psalm 115 playing on her audio Bible.
This is fading away.
Yeah, the camera doesn't give us the slow-motion glitter tears or the highly stylized, neon-lit violence that this show built its entire brand on. The only visual cue we get is a warm blanket and a very slight blue tint on her face.
Right.
It's like navigating a deadly minefield for years, surviving drug lords and high-speed chases and underground trafficking tunnels, only to finally make it home, open your front door, and fatally trip on a shoelace.
That's a great way to put it.
So I have to ask, based on what we're seeing in the sources, did this incredibly subdued ending betray the audience's expectations, or was it a necessary reality check?
Well, the sources actually reveal a fascinating divide on that. But if you look at Levinson's own commentary, he viewed it as an uncompromising necessity. He stated that giving Rue a dramatic, heroic, or even highly stylized death would have been a lie.
A lie, really?
Yeah, he wanted an honest ending. And the brutal reality of the modern fentanyl crisis is that it lacks narrative arc. Like in the past, pop culture depicted addiction as this slow, gradual decline, a series of rock bottoms.
Right, the typical downward spiral.
It's exactly. But with synthetic opioids infiltrating the drug supply today, The landscape has fundamentally changed. A single relapse, a single moment of weakness on a random Tuesday doesn't just mean a setback anymore, it means instant death.
The quietness of her death strips away all the Hollywood glamour.
Precisely. It leaves the viewer with the cold, clinical reality of the epidemic. There is no swelling music to make it feel profound. It just ends.
I noticed that a lot of recovering addicts in the Reddit threads found this specific choice to be harrowing but deeply accurate. The tragedy isn't that she went out in a blaze of glory. The tragedy is how mundane the final mistake actually was.
Yeah, the absolute mundanity of it.
But the episode doesn't just cut to black after she dies on the couch. We transition directly from her physical body into this incredibly vivid, feverish hallucination playing out in her dying mind.
And this sequence is where the show heavily blurs the line between its fictional narrative and the real-world grief surrounding the cast.
The hallucination starts frantically. Rue hallucinates a news report claiming that Fesco, her close friend and local dealer, has escaped prison using parkour.
Which is such a specific detail.
It is, and this is actually a brilliant payoff to a seemingly throwaway phone call they had earlier in the season. Hearing this, Rue starts sprinting. She is running past all these familiar landmarks from the past 3 seasons, the boarded-up convenience store, Jules riding past on a bike.
Right, it's a visual retrospective.
Yeah, and it culminates in her reaching her childhood home. She walks into the kitchen, and her mother, Leslie, is sitting at the table reading the Bible. They embrace, and the lighting is warm, golden, and incredibly peaceful.
It's beautiful.
It is. But the moment that truly shattered the internet was the inclusion of test footage of Angus Cloud, the actor who played Fesco, which was actually shot nearly 7 years ago.
Right. Bringing in archival footage of Angus Cloud, who tragically passed away from an accidental overdose in 2023, turns this from a character's death scene into a massive meta-tribute.
I want to push back on this creative choice, though. Does heavily incorporating the real-world tragedy of an actor's passing into a fictional character's death cross a boundary?
That's a huge question.
Right. I mean, you are an audience member trying to watch a narrative unfold, and suddenly the director is pulling in real-world trauma. Is it a beautiful tribute, or does it manipulate the viewer's genuine, real-life grief just to give unearned emotional weight to a television show?
That tension was hotly debated in the cultural critiques we analyzed.
Yeah.
Some critics definitely felt it was invasive, but when you synthesize the actual fan reactions, the overwhelming consensus points to profound catharsis.
Catharsis. Oh,
Yeah. And remember, Levinson has been very transparent about his own struggles with past addiction. Analysts suggest he used this hallucination sequence to offer both Rue, the character, and Angus, the person, a moment of grace and salvation.
because the waking world didn't give either of them that peace.
That is the core of it. The harsh clinical reality of the fentanyl crisis robbed them both of a peaceful resolution in the physical world. By structuring the episode so that Rue finds absolute safety in her mother's arms and honoring Angus with that raw, unfiltered archival footage, the show provides a spiritual closure in the realm of fiction that reality outright denied them.
Wow.
It's an acknowledgement of the shared grief between the creators and the audience.
That spiritual closure is incredibly moving, but it makes what happens next feel even more jarring to me. Taking Rue out of the narrative leaves this massive, sucking void in the center of the show. Because she was the narrator, her quiet death effectively kills the show's established genre.
It completely upends it.
Right. The second half of the episode violently shifts tone to fill that void. We go from a somber, meditative reflection on addiction straight into an explosive, Tarantino-style crime thriller.
The genre whiplash is unprecedented for a drama of this caliber. It just abandons its intimate psychological focus for high-octane structural chaos.
Just look at the sequence of events immediately following her death. The DEA launches a massive tactical raid on the cartel compound. Lori, the terrifying monotone drug boss who has been methodically pulling the strings for 3 seasons, realizes she's finally caught.
Finally.
And her reaction. Rather than surrender her physical freedom, she simply walks to the edge of the roof and hangs herself. Meanwhile, the cartel's supposedly airtight logistics completely collapse in this bizarre, dark comedy of errors.
It really becomes a comedy of errors.
It's crazy. The DEA actually swapped the drugs in Wayne's fanny pack for laxatives, which he takes, and the highly anticipated Mexican border ambulance raid. The federal agents breach the vehicle and find absolutely nothing but a dead rat.
A dead rat.
Yes. Bishop, the cartel fixer, had executed what the script literally calls an old switcheroo, using a fleet of identical ambulances.
The procedural elements of the show just disintegrate into absolute absurdity. And this structural collapse serves as the backdrop for Ollie's radical transformation.
Right. Ollie has spent the entire series as the calm, deeply philosophical AA sponsor, the voice of reason. But upon finding Rue dead on his couch, something in him completely snaps.
He breaks.
He attends one last AA meeting, but instead of offering wisdom, he delivers this scathing, furious monologue. He stops blaming the addicts and points the finger entirely at systemic complicity. He blames the cartels, the politicians, the international shipping companies, the entire machinery of modern capitalism that allows this poison to flow freely.
It's a huge shift in his worldview.
And then he abandons his role as the mentor. He literally saws off a shotgun and marches down to Alamo's strip club, the Silver Slipper.
It is a complete inversion of his character archetype. The healer becomes the punisher.
He walks into the club and it turns into a saloon shootout. He shoots G in the groin under a table without even blinking. Then he faces off with Alamo in a literal Western-style quick-draw duel.
Just like a classic Western.
Exactly. Alamo tries to cheat by drawing his weapon early, but when he pulls the trigger, he just hears empty clicks. Bishop had secretly unloaded Alamo's gun beforehand, so Ollie executes Alamo with 3 precise shots.
Wow.
I mean, here's where it gets really interesting for you as a viewer. It's like you are reading a deeply personal, emotionally raw teenage diary, and halfway through, someone just copy-pasted a John Wick script into the pages. How are we, as the audience, supposed to reconcile this hyper-masculine revenge fantasy with the core identity of a show that has historically focused on teenage emotional trauma?
Reconciling that tonal shift is exactly where the critics at The Guardian fundamentally split from the general audience.
Ah, okay.
The Guardian piece argued that this entire sequence was a miserable slog that completely distracted from the show's emotional core. They viewed it as a self-indulgent detour. But if we dig into the deeper thematic logic of the series, a different picture emerges.
What kind of picture?
Well, Euphoria has always operated on a principle of externalizing internal trauma. The lighting, the music, the chaotic camera work, it was all designed to show you what the characters were feeling inside.
So you're saying the shootout isn't just a plot device, it's a metaphor.
Look at the structure. Rue was the emotional and moral center of gravity for this entire universe. When she dies, the world literally loses its anchor. The narrative descends into chaotic Old West violence because the empathy that held the story together has evaporated.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. The collapsing cartel logistics, the laxatives, the dead rats, the shotgun duels, these aren't just action tropes. They are the physical, external manifestations of the internal chaos and absolute destruction that addiction leaves in its wake. The world goes mad because the narrator is gone.
I see the thematic logic behind that, but man, it still feels incredibly jarring when you look at the fallout. While Ali is living out this hyper-masculine Western fantasy, the surviving female characters, the ones who were the original emotional anchors of this show, are left stranded in an incredibly bleak, purely transactional reality.
Yes.
And this is the section of the finale that had longtime fans absolutely rioting online.
The depiction of Gen Z survivalism in this final act is intentionally chilling, and it fundamentally alters how we view these young women.
We see Cassie and Maddie back at the 70s-style McMansion, but they aren't processing their grief. They aren't comforting each other. Instead, they are actively turning the house into an OnlyFans content house to pay off the massive debts left behind by the cartel chaos.
It's so dystopian.
The level of detachment Cassie displays is genuinely terrifying. There's a scene where Lexi tries to bring up the reality of Rue's death, and Cassie just shrugs. She literally says she was a drug addict, it still sucks, and she says this while meticulously cleaning a dildo for her next video.
It's a shocking image.
Totally. Maddie, on the other hand, just smirks when she gets the news that Alamo has been killed. She struts out of the compound with Bishop and his poodle, Snowflake, seemingly thrilled to be completely free of her forced marriage and financial debts.
Just walking away from it all. And Jules, who is arguably the second most important character in the entire series, is relegated to a single, entirely silent scene. She is shown trapped in a sugar baby dynamic with an older man, quietly painting a vibrant, starry-skied portrait of Rue.
The contrast between this cold, transactional isolation and the highly emotional, deeply enmeshed relationships these girls shared in the first season, I mean, It couldn't be starker.
I really have to play devil's advocate for the frustrated fans here. Didn't the writers just do a massive disservice to their female leads? You take these incredibly complex, deeply layered young women, and you reduce Jules to a silent painter.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
You have Cassie emotionally lobotomized, shrugging off the tragic death of her friend to focus on internet content. Have they just been reduced to flat background props in Ali's violent revenge story?
It is entirely understandable why a viewer deeply invested in their emotional arcs would feel betrayed. However, the cultural critique from our sources offers a much darker, highly intentional reading of this shift.
Okay, lay it on me.
The Guardian specifically points to author Gia Tolentino's concept of the American scam to explain what is happening here.
Let's define that for the listener. How does the American scam apply to Cassie and Maddie starting a content house?
Well, Tolentino's concept revolves around the idea that in a hyper-commodified, late-stage capitalist society, individuals, particularly young women, are heavily pressured to monetize their own identities, their bodies, and their trauma just to survive.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The argument is that these girls have been subjected to algorithmic grooming for their entire adolescence. They have grown up in a digital ecosystem that rewards them only when they perform for the gaze of others.
So their behavior in the finale isn't just bad character writing, it's a commentary on that specific cultural condition.
Exactly. They have realized that the only way to survive in this broken ecosystem is to stop being the vulnerable prey and start exploiting the system that exploited them. Yeah, Cassie's OnlyFans house isn't merely a desperate plot device to pay off cartel debt. It represents her ultimate capitulation to the logic of the internet. Their emotional numbness is not a flaw in the script. It is the ultimate tragic consequence of their environment.
That's incredibly bleak.
If you, as a listener, have ever felt completely exhausted by the constant pressure to curate your life or to monetize your hobbies just to keep up, you are seeing the extreme, terrifying endpoint of that fatigue in Cassie's storyline. They have commodified themselves so thoroughly that they no longer have the internal bandwidth to even process the death of a childhood friend.
They are physically surviving the finale, but their humanity has been entirely hollowed out by the transactional nature of the world they inhabit. Which brings us to the ultimate polarization of this episode.
The ending.
Yeah, because while Cassie and Maddie are sinking deeper into this cynical transactional reality, Lexi and Ollie go in the complete opposite direction. They embark on this desperate, highly controversial search for moral order that closes out the series.
The transition from the hyper-digital content house to the Texas homestead is arguably the most fiercely debated aspect of the entire 93 minutes.
The imagery is incredibly heavy-handed. Lexi literally turns to reading the Bible to cope with her grief, isolating herself from the digital world entirely. And then we get the final sequence with Ollie.
Which is quite a shift.
Massive. He reverts to using his birth name, Martin McQueen. He travels far away from the neon-lit suburbs to a deeply conservative homestead in rural Texas. It's actually the same family Rue stayed with way back in the season premiere.
That is callback.
Yeah. Martin sits down at a wooden table with his family. He says a traditional, deeply earnest Christian grace over an empty chair left specifically for Rue. He experiences a quiet vision of her smiling at him. And then we get the final shot of the entire series. A show that spent years becoming famous for boundary-pushing debauchery, explicit content, and neon club lighting ends on a shot of an American flag flapping in the breeze, while Martin's voiceover simply says, "May God bless us all." It literally looks like a traditional conservative Norman Rockwell painting. So what does this all mean?
We have to look at the fierce ideological debate in the sources impartially, because the reactions were violently opposed and both sides make compelling arguments about the nature of television and cultural messaging.
Let's look at the criticism first. I saw endless comments on Reddit and Twitter calling this a Republican-coded retreat.
Yes, a significant portion of the audience and several critics felt this was a forced, out-of-character piece of propaganda.
Propaganda.
That's the argument. The idea is that presenting a conservative, rural, deeply religious family as the ultimate sanctuary of peace and moral purity is a regressive narrative choice.
I can see how people would feel that way.
For a show that prided itself on subversive, progressive explorations of gender, sexuality, and modern youth, ending on an image of an American flag and a traditional prayer felt like a clumsy, moralizing lecture tacked onto the end of a drug thriller. To these viewers, it felt like a betrayal of the show's core DNA.
But the sources also highlight a completely different interpretation, one rooted more in psychology than politics.
Yes, absolutely. Other viewers and cultural analysts viewed this ending not as political propaganda, but as a profound psychological truth about the characters' specific journeys.
How so?
Think about what these individuals have endured over the past 3 seasons. The modern, algorithm-driven, progressive, boundaryless world they inhabited completely and utterly failed them.
It really did.
It led to systemic commodification, relentless trauma, cartel violence, and the death of their core friend.
When absolute freedom leads to absolute destruction, the pendulum swings back violently.
That is the core of the counter-argument. When the modern world fails you that spectacularly, what is left? The interpretation here is that their only remaining coping mechanism is to seek out rigid, traditional structures, family, faith, and rural isolation.
It's retreat.
Exactly. They are retreating into traditionalism not as a political endorsement by the creators, but as a desperate survival tactic by the characters. They are exhausted by the chaos. They want rules. They want an anchor. They're trying to find any semblance of peace and order in a universe that has proven to be entirely chaotic and lethal.
It's a fascinating reflection on exhaustion. It forces you, the audience, to question whether the absolute lack of boundaries they experienced in the earlier seasons was actually liberating, or if it was just a different, more insidious kind of trap.
It really challenges the viewer to look at their own relationship with modern freedom and structure.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. For those of you listening, we've walked through the heartbreaking clinical reality of Rue's accidental fentanyl overdose and how it stripped away Hollywood glamour.
It definitely did.
We examined the massive metatextual tribute to Angus Cloud and the debate over blurring real-world grief with fiction. We unpacked the wild, genre-bending Tarantino revenge plot that turned a philosophical sponsor into a Western anti-hero.
A huge pivot.
Right. And we analyzed the tragic, emotionally numb survivalism of Cassie and Maddie through the lens of algorithmic grooming. And finally, we navigated that highly controversial, Americana-drenched final search for moral order.
When you pull all of those disparate threads together, what emerges is undeniably a messy, frequently disjointed tapestry.
Very messy.
But the consensus across the sources is that it succeeds in holding up a harsh, unflinching mirror to a generation navigating the dual crises of the opioid epidemic and digital exploitation. It forces the viewer to grapple with a world where there are no easy, happy endings.
The neat little bows.
Exactly. But beyond the narrative itself, looking at the sheer scale of the chaos in this 93-minute finale raises one final, overarching question about the nature of the show that I want to leave you with.
Okay, what is it?
Throughout this deep dive, we talked endlessly about addiction. Rue's fatal addiction to narcotics. Cassie's chilling addiction to digital validation. But consider Euphoria itself as a piece of streaming-era media. Did this series become addicted to its own shock value?
Oh.
Yet it's been so many years chasing the high of breaking the internet with escalating trauma and wilder twists that in its final moments, it ultimately overdosed on its own narrative, collapsing entirely under the weight of trying to outshock itself.
That is an incredible question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive, and we'll leave you to mull over that haunting final thought. Catch you next time.